Hello everyone, my name is Sonia Sarah. I work at BTHFT, which is Bradford Teachings NHS Hospitals Trust. And yeah, but today's a bit of an open space discussion really, which will be really quite good. And it'll be myself, Freya Sledin from Airedale NHS Foundation Trust and Sarah Schroeder, who have been working to sort of co-facilitate this session. And all three of us will really be speaking and sharing from our own lived experiences and our professional practice. And we invite you into this space to kind of openly speak to us, ask us any questions. We can I suppose, speak from our own experiences, and we welcome sort of a sharing of your own set of experiences, questions you may have, or through your professional practice or personal lived experiences to come together. And we hope it to be a safe space to really openly speak about disability equality and any questions people may have. So just to give you a little bit of context about the festival, so I'm not sure if any of you have been able to join some of the other sessions this week. We've been working in partnership with our great partners. Joanna's been a key member of the planning sort of our working group, and our steering committee is here with us today. The festival is called Connected on Ability, which I'm sure you know, and it's our first ever Bradford District and Craven Health and Care Partnership Disability Festival. So it's so a week long different webinars and sessions for people to join as and when they can, and we hope to sort of propel forwards into next year to sort of learn from the practice from this year with all your sort of input, which is a proactive process, a co-production process. This festival is us kind of leading, but it's everyone taking part and joining alongside us through their own lived experiences. So we welcome you here today. We've got, you may have seen, we'll have had our partners from Equalities Together, a leading disability organisation, and also the Bradford Council. So yeah, so welcome here today. And yeah, I'll do my intro before passing on to onto Freya, and then to Sarah, then to Freya, if that's okay. So yes, I'm Sonia, based in a small little EDI team. I work part-time at BTHFT. I'm a year into post. A lot of my work is on staff engagement and staff equality networks, but also I came into my role through my own sort of experience as well. So I'm a carer, and under our when our staff equality network Enable refreshed their terms of reference, we really looked at broadening that towards including disability by association. So if you're a carer, to encompass some of that. And also long-term conditions. I myself have an autoimmune condition. It's called LS, which is called light chain cirrhosis. It's kind of geared on more a gynecological sort of a condition. But if I have a flare-up, I get really, really unwell. And thankfully, within our team and through our practice, it's really about having an inclusive culture where we can have a space where we can go to our line manager, go to our teammates, and if it's a rough day or a rough time of it, to be able to say what we need, and to have the right support in place as well, to make sure we're supported as practitioners in the field or whatever work we do. And we're also obviously the work gets done, but in a way that feels manageable, meaningful, that we're listened to and heard. I'm also a carer for my mum, and I have been for a while actually. My mum, bless her now, is on palliative care, and I really feel that side of our lives. We bring so much in the background that impacts us in our working fields, but I feel that is strength, because actually we're juggling so much in our personal lives as well as professionally. And I think there's, for me, a real thing about authenticity, about it's okay to say it's really tough. So with me, my mum has now moved on to palliative care. She's on dialysis, she's got heart conditions, she's really, really poorly. And we got the news probably the back end of summer, but I took a little personal time to process some of the news before I spoke to my manager and my team, and they were so great and so grand. And I think it's just knowing that once we feel safe to share, and I think it's about creating, and this is me sharing something very personal here, because I feel like I needed that space to process, but then knowing that I had things in place, because we are a very within my team, it's all about inclusivity, supporting each other, bringing our whole selves to work. We're doing that through the networks. That message, it goes beyond a job. It's making sure we're supporting one another too. And that's at the heart, I guess, of why I do the work I do, why I'm an EDI. I'm not an NHS from before. I've only been in the NHS a year. My formative years, I've worked in HE at the University of Bradford in Peace Studies. I've got a youth community development work background, which I think I bring into my role. I'm also a single parent. So I think for me, it's a real sense of, I mean, with Enable, which is our staff equality network, and Sarah Schroeder is our lovely chair of the network. It's really about us refreshing, revamping. We relaunched on the official day of staff equality, the network's day on 11th of May. And yeah, we're just excited to be here with me and Sarah and our Enable members. Were on the concourse at BRI last week doing our consultation for today's session. So we do have a few questions in the mix, but we'd rather kind of open it up to everyone else. I'll pass on to Sarah, who will give a little introduction to herself, if that's okay. Thank you, Sarah.
Hello everyone, so my name's Sarah Schroeder. I'm the Senior EPR Data Quality Training Facilitator for Bradford Hospitals. I've worked for Bradford since 2012, so I've been here for quite a while now. And my experience that brings me here is personal. So mine is a long-term health condition that affects my it's basically dissociative disorder, and it means that I get stuck in fight or flight essentially. Now the way my doctor explained it to me, it's a bit like breathing. It's not something that I can necessarily control, and it's not necessarily something that I'm even aware I'm doing at the time. All I know is that like the worst period was when I was in my teenage years. A lot of my memories between 17 and 19, I can't actually remember anything, and it's quite frustrating when my friends are telling me about things. Oh, do you remember this? And I have absolutely no recollection of it whatsoever. But so essentially, it's where your brain's quite sensitive to your surroundings, and I get stuck in fight or flight. So my brain essentially just doesn't process the memory in the first place. So it's not that I've just forgotten, it's my brain's just never processed the memory in the first place. And because I'm not aware of it, aware that I'm actually in that mode is really annoying. And trying to work when I have this is incredibly frustrating. And when I first started working, as I said, the worst period was when I was like 19, which is when I was trying to find work. So I ended up working in a place that was very judgmental, doesn't understand at all. And I suppose the one memory I can share that kind of summarises that experience in a nutshell is I was asked to scrub. I was an administrator being asked to scrub tiles because I was frustrating the members of staff there so much with my stupidity. So I joined the NHS shortly after I quit that job, and I have just had the most amazing experience with management here. And that is when I started to learn how to appropriately manage my condition so that I can learn how to kind of ground myself so that I'm not more likely to get stuck in that fight or flight. And the managers here weren't even fully aware of my condition because I was too frightened to actually share it, which is partly why I wanted to join Enable in the first place, is because I'm very conscious of how many people out there are too frightened to share who they are as a person because they then get labelled in a certain category and that is who they're judged on. But my managers, they were so patient. They never once judged me. They built me up from the ground up, and I have since managed to progress to up the ladder within the NHS, and I completely put this down to the managers that I had and how they've supported me. And my current manager now is well aware of everything. I did disclose everything to her, and it's a feeling that you can't really explain when you've got that manager that just accepts you wholeheartedly, that when you're having a bad day and you would normally feel really anxious going into work because you know you're having a bad day and you think they're not going to understand, I'm going to get judged for this, I'm going to get labelled as a problematic staff member. My manager just says, it's fine, relax, take the day, just it's not a problem. So that's kind of my personal experience of my disability.
Thank you, Sarah. And yeah, well, let's invite Freya to say a few words and introduce yourself, please, Freya.
Yeah, it's lovely to see the variety of people on the call. My name's Freya Sledding. I'm Chief Allied Health Professional at Airedale, so I look after all the therapists that work within the hospital and the community at Airedale. And I'm also co-chair with Joanna, who's on the call today, of our Enable network, which is Airedale's Enable network, and it sounds like we've got many similarities between what we're working on within the staff network. I'm an occupational therapist by profession, and I think that's really given me a real good understanding of disability and the impact disability has on people, and the varied disabilities that from mental health conditions right to physical conditions. And I've always been an advocate through my profession of people reaching their potential, whatever disability they have. And that a lot of the work that I've done clinically is about actually getting people with disabilities back into work or adapting work for people with disabilities. So clinically it's a passion, but actually I've got a hidden disability myself, and I've got lived experience of what the barriers are to working with a disability. I've got dyslexia. I wasn't diagnosed with dyslexia until I did my master's programme when I was almost 40. So I've struggled knowing I just didn't process things the same way that everyone else did, and sort of went through school being ridiculed really about my essay writing, and sometimes when I speak and mispronounce words, and it's very low level stuff, but it actually does really impact your confidence in how you function. Really lucky that when I did my master's course, I had an assessment which gave me what I needed strategies to overcome, and I had an access to work assessment at that point. And actually, I manage really, really well, and I manage really well because I've always been very open about my disability. Even before I had a diagnosis, I sort of said, my strength isn't written stuff. I'm not really good at reading aloud, and I'm not really good at processing a lot of information quickly. And I've had managers that have supported me, but I know through our experience of our staff network, that's not always the case. And I'm really passionate that some people don't feel they can disclose their disability, and I feel that is something as a community we need to work on, that we need to get rid of the stigma of disability and actually see it as a positive thing. There's things that I can do with dyslexia that most people can't do. And I'm very much a strengths approach. There are people with disabilities that have empathy, that actually all the research shows that if we employ people with disabilities, we have a more empathetic, high quality service for our patients. And a little bit like Sonia, I'm a working carer as well. So my mum's got dementia, just about living on her own, which means that I am often on the call to sort and problem solve something that she's not coping with that particular day. And I have flexibility with work for that. And I'm lucky that I share that with my sister, who's maybe a bit more accessible than me. But yeah, I think all that lived experience has just given me the passion to support people with disabilities, and really proud how the festival's gone this week. Some really powerful sessions. And hopefully we're on that stepping stone as Bradford and Craven District to start supporting people better and recognising it. So yeah, that's a bit about me. I don't know whether Jo, you just want to introduce yourself as my other half in the Enable group.
Yes, as Freya says, I co-chair with Freya the Airedale Enable Network Group. I am a biomedical scientist and I work within pathology, although as a reasonable adjustment for my disability, which is MS and very physical in nature, so very different from hidden disabilities. I work from home exclusively. And my job title is Deputy Pathology Quality Manager. So I'm doing a lot of work with documents and making sure all the policies and procedures and stuff is up to date and people are supported to get their work in that aspect of laboratory work done and supported. So I'm also very passionate about making sure that people who are in the workforce who are disabled are supported. And vast majority of people go on to develop a disability while they're actually in work, so they're not necessarily coming to work already with a disability. They develop it or they are diagnosed whilst they are in the workplace. So it's even more important that we support people through that process of, as Sonia said, coming to terms with stuff that's going on in their lives and supporting them outside of work as best we can, but definitely within work to enable them to bring their best selves to work every day as much as everybody else can.
Thank you. Thank you, Joanna. I just want to say a big thank you to Sarah, Freya and Joanna for sharing, because it's actually, and I feel myself as well, can be quite difficult to share, but I really believe in creating systems and work practices where we are able to share. And I don't think we should shy away from, I think there's something about that whole sense of considered vulnerability and the strength in that, and having safe spaces, safe, authentic work cultures where we can promote that inclusive practice for disclosure. I mean, I'll just bring us back to just to BTHFT really quickly. Our staff survey results recently indicate that we have a diverse workforce, so 23% declare a disability. However, on our ESR electronic staff records, that isn't representative. We only have 4% of staff who will declare a disability, and I'm bearing that in mind in the context actually 37% of people that have responded to the staff service, so them figures may not even be representative anyway. You know, it's in the context of just the facts that we have there. But it brings me back to something that Freya said about really debunking and demystifying the stigma of disability, because we had a session yesterday on disability declaration, and it's something, there's a real fear, and I know within the Enable network for us at the Trust here, there's a real fear to really be open and share, because there's a genuine fear of how that will affect people's career progression, how that will be received by their teammates, and that is something, you know, that is a real thing that we're trying to sort of tackle really within our network. So yes, sorry, I can see two hands raised. Freya, and there's May. So if I invite Freya in first and then May, that'd be grand. Yeah, thank you.
Just to say that them stats, Sonia, really mirror what we experience at Airedale, and I think mirror other organisations, that actually when it's anonymous and you can fill a staff survey in and declare your disability without any retribution, that you will do, and you say that. But when we are asking for declarations, we've just got 3%, and we know that 25% of the working population is disabled. So it's really unreflective of the communities that we serve. So I think there is something about declaration, but I also think there is something about representation and things about people with disabilities getting jobs in health and social care, and the recruitment process, and a lot of other things that cause blockages for people with disabilities. So it's fantastic that we're starting to think and talk and discuss all these things, but there is a lot of action we need to do if we are truly aiming for representation within our workforce.
Thank you, Freya. And yeah, I guess if May, would you like to come in?
Yes, please. So I don't work in your locality. I've logged in because I saw the event on the Eventbrite, and so I've signed up. So I'm actually down in London, but I do work for the NHS, and I'm an occupational therapist. And I recently came down with long COVID, and that exacerbated symptoms I'd always suspected for years, but I hadn't gone for a diagnosis because the waiting lists at the GP and all this sort of thing, and also, like working life. So, but I feel so I'm in the position now where I feel that long COVID has exacerbated sort of elements of autism and ADHD that I've probably had my whole life. And my father was definitely, like, his presentation was extremely autistic, and my mother had, you know, anyway. So, and I'm probably not going to be able to go for a diagnosis now. So then the whole declaration of disability becomes problematic, because I don't, you know, it's the whole thing of, well, I'm asking people to go on my say so. The other thing I thought about is I was having a conversation with someone recently who also has a hidden disability, not about the NHS, but he'd just been hired into a job. He'd just been 4 weeks into a job, and he was wanting to know, he was asking me about, we were just friendly discussing, looking at asking his employer for reasonable adjustments. And I asked him why he didn't declare at the interview. And he was just like, well, how do you know? Yes, they're supposed to not discriminate, but how do you know? Who's going to hold them to reckoning if they do? And I was like, good point, well made. Yeah, I've just come through a fairly difficult experience with some managers in the NHS. And even now, I would be hesitant. If I went back to that particular manager, I would be hesitant to disclose. I will leave it there.
Can I come back in on that, May? Because I think you raise a really, really good points about disclosure and recruitability and those sorts of things. You said, why would you? Actually, I don't know whether you're aware of the workforce standard for equity standard that each of the NHS trusts have to report on, and actually they report on the numbers of disabled people at shortlisting that are actually put into jobs. And yes, there is a difference between non-disabled but actually it is being monitored. So actually you have got a way in to say this isn't right, and it is protected by legalities around that. So I think we have got problems in the NHS in the fact that, I know, talking in my organisation, when you tick those magic 2 ticks for I declare a disability on your application form, do managers really take that on board? Do they offer you reasonable adjustment about the recruitment process? Do they do things like that? And that's something that me and Jo are really actively working on with recruitment in our organisation. Because I'm not so sure, by having that lived experience of putting 2 ticks when I've just applied for a job and not being asked what reasonable adjustment do I need for that interview, I'm really taking that lived experience of saying, no, I wasn't, but actually it didn't stop me going and saying, I've got dyslexia, I am not going to perform really well in this interview. What I need to do is use the strategies that I use every day. So I went into the interview with a book and I wrote the questions down. I took my time and I said, I will refer back to this book and I will make notes before I answer you. And actually it worked a dream. And that's the first time I've had the confidence to do that. But within our organisation, we're doing a lot on inclusive recruitment because we recognise that it is a barrier for people getting that first job in the NHS if they've got a disability. So it is something. So you raise really good points. But actually, if we don't declare and we don't be brave and we don't say those things, we're never going to change the current practice.
Yeah, thank you, Freya, and thank you, May. Just quickly before I bring Sarah in, I just want to say at BTHFT we recognise the challenges around all this, and I think we've launched an equality census campaign to encourage more staff to share their personal diversity data more openly with the trust. So we're looking at more innovative ways or more different ways to try to sort of address these issues, really. And we'll be sharing shortly one of the projects that we've worked on, but I'll bring Sarah in first, and it'll be Sarah that'll be sharing that, and then we'll open up to Freya, who will open us up to a wider discussion from your experiences from taking part on the sessions this week. So Sarah, if you come in please, that'll be great. Thank you.
So I just wanted to kind of respond to a few things that were just mentioned there, that because everyone's experiences are different, and I kind of see, I'm quite fortunate that because of my experiences, I've managed to kind of move through quite a lot of stuff. And May, you mentioned about how you've had experiences of management that haven't been supportive, and that's something that I have unfortunately also had experiences of, because I've always chosen to be quite open about my problems, which hasn't always benefited me in a positive way, unfortunately. And my first role that I kind of mentioned was an apprenticeship that I was young, and I did disclose that I was having these problems, but a lot of the things that I would do was something as simple as like having to file alphabetically, and something as basic as literally just filing alphabetically, I would get wrong. And there'd be a number of things that I would make mistakes with, but it was also the fact that I was being bullied by their staff force. And instead of looking at their own actions and how their actions was causing this to get worse, they would use my disability as a form of blame, of saying, right, well, this is happening because you have this, which was incredibly frustrating, which is why I ended up quitting the job. But what massively changed how I looked at everything was therapy. So I've had about 4 years worth of psychological therapy, where I had cognitive behavioural therapy as well as EMDR. I can't remember what EMDR even stands for now, but it was the CBT that had such a profound impact on how I looked at everything. And I joined the NHS whilst I was coming to an end of my CBT, but it built my confidence, and it's quite effective in changing your thought process on how you look at things. So where I would have something in front of me and I would think this particular thing about that issue, CBT kind of retrained my brain to think of it in a different manner. So instead of seeing the negativity in all aspects of my life, I actually learned how to see the positives. But when I joined the NHS, it kind of gave me more of a strength of character so that I could have these healthy conversations with people. So I continued to be open and honest about my disability, but because I'd had all of this therapy, it allowed me to confidently have these conversations with people. And I would still come across people that just wouldn't understand, and they would respond to me in a manner that a few years ago I probably wouldn't have responded to very healthily. But now I can have these conversations with people in a healthy manner, that I try and look at it as an educational thing. So when people are often judgmental from management's perspective, I would try and keep calm about the matter, but try and educate them a little bit better about their perspective on things. And I appreciate that that's not something that's very easy to do, and it's not something that's always worked for me, but it's what's kept me going, because the attitude I try to take with all of these things is, if I choose to keep quiet about these issues, then we are never going to change people's perception of them. So I would much rather take that battle onto my hands with an amazing team of supporting people who have had similar experiences. But if we choose to speak up about them, hopefully, maybe not now, maybe not tomorrow, but as time goes on in a few years' time, we will eventually change people's perceptions. And even one of these examples was someone that I used to work with, and she didn't realise my experiences, and she made comment about her brother's girlfriend being psycho because she sees a psychologist. So I decided to take the opportunity to point out to her that I see a psychologist. And it was kind of an awkward moment, but it was actually awkward for her primarily because she was then embarrassed by what she said, but she actually learned from that. So that was just one example of me being open and honest. I was able to then change someone's perception and say, well, actually, just because she sees this person doesn't mean she's psycho. So yeah, I don't know if that helps at all, mate, but it doesn't solve anything, because I know how hard it is to work with managers that are not supportive, and I hope that you never have to have that experience with someone ever again. But it's just my attitude towards it is to try and educate in hopes that we make change.
Thank you, Sarah. I'd like to invite Joanna in. Joanna, you've got your hand raised. That'd be great.
Yes, just to, again, in response to May, really, I believe the Equality Act wording is not dependent on a diagnosis. The diagnosis isn't important. The actual piece of paper or a doctor's note that says you have long COVID or autism or MS or anything is not essential. It's, do you consider yourself to have a disability, and what impact does that have on your day-to-day life, your day-to-day work life, your day-to-day outside of life? So do you consider yourself to have a disability? If the answer to that is yes, and then you are able to use the work for the Equality Act to get to have those discussions with managers and get those reasonable adjustments put in place. So it's not dependent on a piece of paper that says you have long COVID or you have whatever. So if your friend has a disability, if he considers himself to have a disability within the wording of the Equality Act, he can ask his managers for reasonable adjustments, and they have a duty of care to consider those requests.
Thank you.
Does that help,
Thank you
May?
both. Yes, thank you both. Well, thank you everybody who's responded. Yes, it does help. Yes, it clarifies a lot of things, but there's still, this is probably just me, just the distrust, I guess, and that's probably largely based on past poor experience. So I need to get over it. Thank you, anyone.
It is hard, but you have the backing of everybody here for sure, and we've all had fairly similar experiences by the sounds of things. And one bad day does not make a bad life. One bad manager does not make a bad career.
Great, agree.
Thank you.
Just aware of time, and we've got 25 minutes, and it's great to have these questions and interactions, but obviously I want to open the floor for anyone that wants to ask. The title of the workshop was what is it you want to know about disability but daren't ask. So I hope you feel safe in this environment, that we're not experts in, but we've got lived experience of how we are, and we've got experience of dealing with situations for people to ask the questions. So if you want to ask something, either want to put it in the chat or raise your hand, please do, and we'll try our best to answer those questions. And if we don't know, we'll find out. It's one of those things that it's a bit scary, this opening the floor to any questions about disability and being asked to know the answer. I can't pretend I will know the answer, but between us, we'll be able to give some advice, and we'll be able to find out for sure. So if anyone has, but as maybe a warm up to that, if people sort of just want to reflect on, I don't know whether this is the only session that people have come to, or they've come to a few sessions over the course of the week, of what were the highlights of that? What did you think about those sessions? What was helpful? What questions did it leave you thinking? Because I don't know about you, sometimes I ponder over things after I've attended these things, and then something comes into my head of that. So if there is anything from some of the sessions that you've attended this week, please raise your hand or put something in the chat box around those as well. So really, it's your time. We don't want, we between the four of us, I'm sure we could talk talk a full hour, but I am going to shut you all up at this point and give the other people some space. So yeah, over to you. This is where it goes deadly silence and we lose everyone. No, thank you, Jonathan, for coming in so quickly.
How much did we pay him?
If you could put the heating on, that would be good.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, we're all right.
It's not so much a question, just more of an observation. I mean, I've been in public sector now for kind of 13 years in various organisations, and the training, the EDI training, is still seen as a real tick box exercise. And I think a session like this, where people with lived experience of disabilities are willing to be open and willing to talk about them, is much more useful than clicking through things. So maybe we need to see that system change. And I think it is started. So Fred, to pick up on your interview, I'm quite recent in post, started in September, and we had an assessment morning to overcome barriers. When I turned up to the interview, the questions were pre-printed for people. So I think there are pockets of good practice, but it's about how we link up those pockets and make the whole system connect. So there's been people that have had good managers, poor managers, and we need to work on that good practice. And events and weeks like you've put on here are fantastic at being able to highlight those good practices and carry them forward. So not necessarily a question, more of an observation. So thank you for putting them on.
I think you're really, really right. And I suppose we didn't realise the power of this festival, really. We sort of did it in the fact of what are questions we get in organisations and what do we want to. But I think we're going to have an evaluation of it and take the learning forward. And I strongly agree with you that EDI training is a tick box exercise. It's something that we all have to do as mandatory training. It needs to feel real, doesn't it? And we need to learn from it. And actually, the people that do engage with this sort of thing are engaged. It's the people that don't engage. And how, really, I suppose my challenge is, how do we engage the people that don't want to listen? Yeah. Or do we just move with this positivity that you were talking about, Jonathan, and focusing on the positive stuff of sharing good practice and I suppose when you think about change management, that's what it's all about, isn't it? Going with the energy. And I think what I felt this week is a real energy and commitment and bravery of people standing up and wanting to come together and support each other. So I think you're right. I think we're on our first step of changing the world.
I think it's potentially go back. So when I started at Bradford District Care Trust 2009. And we had a week-long induction there. So that was proper, meaningful discussions with a group about all the different things, fire safety, everything, but also EDI. And that was useful because you had the opportunity to ask questions, whereas every other organisation I've joined since has been that online. So I think we need to go back to pre-austerity, where there was perhaps a little time to invest in people as they join the organisation and get the values straight away, because it is about values, isn't it?
Definitely. Yeah, no, that's a really good point. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Jonathan. Just a quick point I'd like to bring in. So yeah, at BTHFT, what we're doing is we're refreshed, myself and my colleague Ruth Hay, refreshing our EDI managers training for staff, which we're looking to do a pilot run of it in the new year and then roll it out with our the wider sort of framework of our the training with our education department and team. And part of that, actually, it's if anyone was able to join the session on Wednesday, we worked on Workforce ADES, which is a workforce disability workforce standard. We worked on an innovation fund. We were one of the winning trusts, and that video, we probably won't have a chance to play it today again, but it's all lived experience, and Sarah was one of our contributors on that. That will help inform that training. So we're trying to move away from that tick boxy approach to kind of, it's kind of lip service to sort of consultation or being a part of something. We want the training to be, you know, to be real, where people can relate to it, there's relatability that it can be then used in practice. So that project, where there's a big an exhibition that will be on our main concourse at BRI, hopefully next week for a week. It's quite a mammoth thing, but it will be coming up there, and the video's going far and wide. If anybody would like access to that, it is I think Sarah's put it on there. It's a YouTube link. We don't want to take away this time of discussion to playing that here, but please feel free to check that video out. There's it's really quite powerful, and that will be utilised in our training to keep it centred on lived experiences. So you know, so people like myself who probably wouldn't have thought I could go for a job in the NHS. I had a career break, single parent, looking after my mum. I just had a good supportive network around me, and I went for it. Not NHS, you know, and just to know that people, I could be supported in my role and be effective at doing my job. And I think there's something about that, and I think training is a massive element to that. So thank you, Jonathan. And training that's, you know, more creative, innovative, and not so tick boxy. So thank you. So and go back to Freya. Sorry, I think you're coming in, Freya. Freya, would you like to?
No, I was just saying, I'm just looking at the comments. It's really good that people have recognised the positivity in the festival, and I know everyone wouldn't have been able to get to every of the session, and they've picked particular sessions of interest, but all the recordings will be shared. So if you've got time to sit in and rewatch some of the sessions, I'm sure you'll get a lot out of them. A particular standout moment for me on the festival was the hidden disability session. I don't know whether anyone was out of that, but it was, I mean, the fact that Natalie, who facilitated the session, really wanted representation of people with other neurodiverse conditions, and we did a lot of asking out, could someone support Natalie with this? Is there anyone that's got autism, ADHD, any of the other dyspraxia, to maybe tell their lived experience? Because Natalie was really conscious that dyslexia doesn't cover the whole range of those conditions, and the fact that she didn't get anyone brave enough to speak there really rung true for me. And actually what happened in that session is that we created that safe space where people came and sort of, probably for the first time, talked about their condition quite openly, and got support from each other. And that feeling of not being the only person that have encountered those barriers, and it wasn't all doom and gloom, to be honest. There was some horrible negative experiences, but actually there's some really positive stuff around what things had really helped people in work. So that for me was a really standout moment. And I think we've obviously got lots of work to do, but we really need to work on the stigma of hidden disability as a system, and work on recognising the value of having people with neurodiverse conditions in our workforce. I think that's what really came out for me, is that we don't want all the same people in our workforce. We want the diversity, don't we? And that's what gives us strength within our workforce. So yeah, for me, that's my personal pledge, to try and find ways of doing that. And I think Airedale's quite a little organisation, and actually, you know, out of 3,500 people, if you're the only person speaking up, it might feel quite a big thing. But actually, as a system, we've got people that can be speaking up. So if anyone's interested in supporting me with that element of it, that's something that I want to take forward. Sarah, you've got your hand up. That's my dyslexia, isn't it?
It was more to share on from your experience, Freya, because my wife actually has dyslexia, and it's quite severe to the extent that she can't actually read. And she works for a residential school in Halifax for children with extreme behavioural difficulties and autism. So she often comes home really frustrated, because I remember distinctly when she first started working there that she would come home and the staff had been complaining because when she'd written the kind of diary of the day, people would complain because her writing was illegible, or they would complain because like she wouldn't read a particular document fast enough, or do something a particular way because she wasn't capable. And she was very quickly categorized as the idiot within the team, but she's been there for say 5 years now. And from there, she's grown so significantly in her confidence that now they've got doctors that work very closely with the school because of the children with autism. And she can often give the doctors a run for the money in terms of her knowledge. She is so insanely clever when it comes to autism. And it's like I don't know how to explain it, but it's like she's just got this like kind of
The superpower.
connection.
Yeah, I call it my
Underpants
superpower.
on the outside, definitely.
Yeah, because there's children that don't talk, and they never will. And she has this uncanny ability to know just from a mumble that the child will make, they need a drink, they're hungry, they need this, they need that. And she tells me about these moments when she's home, and I can't understand it, because I look at that and I think, how on earth could you possibly get from A to B from a mumble? And she is right every single time. And it just shows, because Freya, you mentioned something at the beginning, and I was meant to say this earlier, where it's a strength, and that, like, she is, to me, a plain example of superpower. Because yes, she can't read, and as soon as you say to someone, yes, my wife can't read, but she is insanely clever. And I always say to her that her standard of work, like, she should have a degree in the field, because she knows so much that does give the doctors a run for the money. Like, she will often get stuck in really lengthy conversations about a child, and the doctor will have one perspective and she'll say, well, actually, I think you're wrong and I think it's this. And the doctor will often say, actually, I think you're right. But
that's thinking out of the box sometimes, isn't it? And that creative thinking, isn't it?
It is.
And that's why I'd like to be, instead of us seeing disabilities negative, seeing about what it gives the workforce and what it gives the organisation. And we need to move that, don't we, somehow?
At Airedale, we're trying to gather together some staff stories, aren't we? So we've got our 2 staff stories to kind of highlight how our lived experience, but we're always looking for new lived experience stories, if people are willing to share, to show the diversity of our workforce.
That's right.
That's literally why I've got my hands up. So why part of Stronger Communities team in Bradford Council, and we're kind of about cohesion and integration. So we have something called the People Library, where we've collected all these examples of lived experiences, not a disability point of view, from a cohesion. But I'm just thinking, if you've got Airedale with 3,500 members and maybe one person who's willing to speak up about particular, and Bradford Council with 8,000, and we need the system to join these up and create that wide variety of things. So I'll bob a link in the chat to maybe hopefully give you some inspiration for these shared stories and lived experiences.
Really useful.
That'd be great. Yeah.
And I love that, Jonathan, because that whole, the living libraries, it's got that whole thing of a library. It's behind the idea, behind the Innovation Fund, which is the link for the video there. But it was something for us about, just to quickly sort of share, when I put the bids together, it was my first kind of task into role at the Trust. And I grew up in Saltaire, and I don't know if anyone's familiar with Saltaire back 20 years ago, so it might be longer. But there used to be a little fairground at the top of there, and it was a childhood memory for me of, wanting to do something quite creative with a disability, raising the profile of disability quality at the Trust. And the idea of a living libraries carousel for me is what we're doing here a little bit. We're moving around, we're all speaking, we're sharing from our lived experiences. And that for me is more powerful. You're right, Jonathan. And, everyone who shared today, I think there's a real sense of how do you create something that goes beyond, me and Freya had a chat yesterday, moving away from a formal presentation today, because as a Kickstarter, because actually we want to debunk the formalised way of learning and presenting and sharing. This is more powerful, us together, So I see that the power of that for me is massive. And I guess it was in my vision through my own sort of experiences to want to bring that into to do something more innovatively. So I love the libraries, the kind of people library, the living libraries aspect of it, and the carousel side of it. We've got to think outside the box, which is the power of our neurodiverse staff and our colleagues and people, and just think outside the box, think creatively, innovatively. The challenges are there, the conversations are hard, but what creative solutions or what practices and policies can we put in place, and ways of working to make sure we are trying to achieve better equality within our organisation. So yeah, thank you. I'll just pass it back to the floor because I can't talk for England. So yeah. We've got about 8 minutes. If there's anything else, I think it'd be great to anybody would like to share or speak of, that would be great, really. Yes.
I'm distracted now looking at all those stories now. I'm going to stop and look at it when this session's after. But there's just so much to look at now.
That's it. And I think just sort of coming in, I think it's the visioning behind it. I know Joanna, that seed was really kind of set with yourself and a few, like Freya and a few others at Airedale, and the people that came together to sort of pull this festival together, from our council partners, from various organisations, from other trusts, BDCT as well. And I think there's a real sense of there's a real pool of expertise for our lived experiences aside from our professional roles, that the power of both of them coming together, bringing regionally our heads together on this in our different capacities, is how we want to move forward into sort of next year as well. And Freya did mention we'll all come together to reflect on how the festival's gone, and how we can sort of develop this bigger, wider for Disability History Month next year as well. And I think obviously there'll be an evaluative process. We will welcome your honest feedback to us, because that will help shape us and drive it, because this festival has to be co-produced by everyone. It is a team effort. It is a collective spirit, a sprint, or whatever you call it. And for me, the power of that is in our staff equality networks. We've got Freya and Johanna here. We've got Sarah. I'm a member of Enable, aside from my work capacity as well. And I think this is what will drive real meaningful change. And I know with our staff equality networks, there's a seat at the table every quarter with our Equality Diversity Council. So our chief exec Mel Pickup chairs that. There's a People's Academy. So we're trying to, it's that grassroots level learning in our clinical fields and our professional roles, but how can that drive real change at the top down as well? So for us, that's quite the vision that we have really as a trust. But I have to say, I mean, I feel like I've been a bit of the in this process of sort of working towards planning the festival with our partners here. I've loved every moment, every stressing moment of trying to organise schedules and diaries, because for me this is at the heart of why I'm, I guess, in the job I'm doing. Initially, I mean, when I went for the job, in my my recruitment process was actually really great. I had a really good interview process. I went in with my passion when I went for this job, and I brought in my lived experiences. But aside from that, I think it's having managers and people in sort of the recruitment section side of stuff really understanding and appreciating the diversity of people coming. I'm quite different to coming into the NHS. I think I bring added value with my own personal experiences, but I think that needs going across the board, doesn't it? So we need to make sure through innovative training. So Jonathan, you touched on that. Main, your experiences, it's just to point out, I think it's we all bring to this table in our own spheres really bad, horrible experiences that we shouldn't be happening, but that will actually give you the strength in different capacities, and you reflect on this time. Honestly, trust me, I've been there when my mum went for a PIP application that got rejected initially. She was devastated and heartbroken, and I advocated on her behalf, but it was frustrating. So for me, this goes beyond just us as a hospital. It goes beyond us working in the community. It goes into sort of the job centres, everything. And we've had members from the job centre attend that have been really great in the festival. But I think these I know my mum would never have gone back to put anything in again. She was literally broken from that appeal that we did, and they literally said, well, you've managed to, with a hand, you've managed to walk however many. But she said, well, we had to get into the place, and she didn't have a badge at this time, and it was just like a catch-22 situation of her having to justify or trying to explain herself, and she was so unwell, and I got angry, and that rage, and I can't tell you, that rage fueled me into wanting to do the jobs and the work and the passion that I've got. And what I'm saying, what I'm trying to sort of hopefully offer you, May, is just that sense of these experiences that mold us, that shape us, do not define us. It will empower you within your working life, your personal life, to be able to use that and fuel it in a different way. And I hope it does. And I just want to say that, you know, happy to share my email and things on here. Happy for anyone to reach out if there's anything post or would like to ask, maybe in, so, you know, in sort of separately to the sessions of the festival. You know, I'm committed to this beyond my role, really. We live it, we breathe it. You know, all of us at some point, it's going to hit us where we might get unwell or ill health, and for our working lives. And I think this is at the core of our being, EDI across the board, across all strands, in terms of intersectionality as well, the implications of some of that, and the you know, all of that is probably a separate, maybe dyslexia session we can explore further. But I just hope you leave this week with a bit more hope, and yeah, a bit more hope, I think, into that things are, we're trying collectively to do things better, and we welcome you all on board with us. Thank you. So hi, yeah, Joanna, come on in. Thank you.
Just really quickly, from what Sonia's saying, is the confidence it gives you being part of this group is great, because you can challenge things in the community as well, not just within your work life. I had an experience last weekend where I went to a restaurant that had a huge toilet but no handholds. It had one of the pull cord alarms fitted, no cord, but the reset button for it, but no handholds or anything to make a disabled person's life much easier in the toilet. And when I challenged the manager, he said, Environmental Health have said I don't need to, so we're not going to. So I've spoken to a journalist this week, and there's a photographer coming around this afternoon to take a picture of me to have it put in the local newspaper, because it is not acceptable in this day and age that one of the only restaurants in my local town that I've got a level entry into, that's not got a step up into, does not have accessible toilet facilities. So I had a fabulous experience. Otherwise, great food, great atmosphere. The staff were amazing, but the toileting facilities were just a bit rubbish. So yeah, don't mess with the Barkwith, basically, and it will be in the press at some point. No, and just to put this into context, I live near Middlesbrough, so I don't live in Bradford or Skipton, Silsden sort of area, so it's a long way away from you guys, so it isn't a local to you town. It's Yarm, but you know, it has given me the confidence. I mean, I've always been a fairly confident person, but it's definitely given me the confidence, because I can then say I am co-chair of the Staff Disability Network. I know what I'm talking about.
Cool.
We can do this together. So it does give you a degree of confidence, being, you know, safety in numbers and all that. So yeah, I echo what Sonia was saying.
Thank
I'm
you.
going to have to drop off because I've got another meeting to go to.
Yes.
I'm really sorry, guys.
Yeah, we've come to close session. Freya, I'd like to pass to you, maybe to close round off the session. If that's okay.
I've got a minute just to say wow.
Yeah.
Wow is what I'm going to say. Thank you so much for everyone's. I think it's just fueling our knowledge, our awareness, and that support. So I hope everyone's got something positive of this session and the others, and I'm excited for next year, where we're going to go next year with this. So yeah, really good stuff, and stay positive, stay fighting, really good stuff. Thank you for your time and your input.
Thank you everyone. Thank you.
Bye everyone.
Have a lovely day. Bye.